We'll hear you, Roger.
Okay, sorry, we have two Zoom mics and we didn't have them on.
Okay,
My
thank
fault.
you.
Uh, I think we're done with the announcements. Anyone else have anything they want to say? So John has graciously agreed to do our show and tell tonight. So just so you know how this works is we have two mics. This is for the auditorium. This one is for the Zoom crowd. So both of them are on there. So if he asks you to say something, he'll pass the mic to you so the people on Zoom can hear you. Okay, over to you, John.
All right, we're going to do our show and tell. I don't see anything for a challenge, so we're going to start with our show and tell. And these four are Dave Fisk. Come on up. Give us just give a little description of each piece and hold it up.
I'm
So
going to try to
Dave.
make it quick. My show and tells are typically about my process for learning and developing things. The story here is that a couple years ago when I joined this effort hobby, I didn't like natural edge at all until I saw a couple real ones from some of the people here in the club that I got kind of excited. I really only did this because I got at one of our raffles this piece of burl, an unknown type. So I thought I'd turn it. So this was my first burl and first natural edge. I always have stories with my objects. You can see this here. Recently I bought some maple burl at the Guild of Oregon Woodworkers sale about a month ago. And so that was the first time I, with this one, had worked in burl. I've got two candles here, if you want to see this, that I made out of this burl that were just cutoffs from a larger bowl. I've already given the bowl away to someone who lives in Spokane, so it's out of sight. The little short story behind the candles was that every Christmas our family does stocking stuffers. Everyone contributes to everyone's stocking stuffers. I decided I'd do candle holders this year because I had a need to practice, a need to play with my tools a bit. So I made candle holders. I actually made 24 of them. I only needed 12, thinking that for one, I'd probably lose some in the process or wouldn't like any of them. And in the end, I used them all up. These few I have up here actually came up after that group. There's these two burls, and this is a tree of heaven. You see me show a couple tree of heaven things in the past. This material is really nice when you look up close in terms of the grain in the wood. And this is really clean sample, but this was one of my more favorite shapes I came up with. So the whole exercise on candle making was around practicing tools. Everything I could try. I tried all kinds of different kinds of shapes. None of them are here. These are pretty straightforward, but I did a lot of other things trying to just learn to use the tool. So I developed a lot in that process, but it was fun.
Thank you. We have a couple here from John Waller. Okay, John Waller.
So I had, for years, I've been doing a bunch of crotches. I'd cut them up and seal them and I'd throw them in my woodshed. And I went in one the other day and I said, I'm going to organize my woodshed. So I took it all out and found out that it had rotted and fallen into the ground and the rats had lived in it. And so I said, fixed it, one project. And I said, well, before I put all this wood back in there, I'm going to process it. And so I had this small crotch from a big leaf maple tree. And I said, well, I'll process it up. I cut it into a circle and cut it in half. And I was going to throw this in the wood pile because it had or into the fireplace because it had a pith in it, and it showed up with a branch, a secondary thing. And I thought, well, what's the heck? I'll just give it a turn and have the other side, which looks pretty good. And so I'll practice. But I think it came out pretty good. It still has some of the feathering in it, and the pith is kind of interesting. So I'm pretty happy with the way it came out. And then my buddy has he did a bunch of necks for guitars out of bird's eye maple. And some of them, the wood wasn't any good for, guitar necks. And I have a whole bunch of this burl maple, and it's really hard and it turns beautiful. And I'd made this little bowl, and it had sat on the base plate I'd had it on, and I didn't like the shape. And after we went down to the symposium and I'd seen the guys turning the small little things, I said, well, I'll give it a shot. And I changed it, and I really like how it came out. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you. This one's a Roger Crooks. Some guy named Roger. Oh, wait, that's you.
So I found a 10-year-old piece of mango back in my woodshed, and it was a little punky, but it started out to be about an inch bigger. But by the time I got through all the rot, that's the size of the bowl. But I don't know. I think the shape is pretty nice.
That's mango.
Mango.
Nice.
Don't keep it for 10 years before you put it.
And this monster bowl belongs to Jason Goodrich.
Doesn't feel like much of a monster bowl. I've turned a lot bigger, but I also like to bring and talk about things that I've been learning. One of the things with this bowl, I've learned a lot that people don't really care much about round and brown, where it's just a plain brown bowl. So adding things like a bead on the rim and a little bit of an undercut can really help level up the bowl. And then the finish is always really important. So one of the things that I've been doing is I have a spray bottle of water that I keep next to the lathe. So after I do the first round of sanding, I'll spray it all down with water and let it dry and raise the grain, and then go back and resand. And that will go a long ways to help it smooth out. But then I use the finish and wet sand with the finish. And that again adds to that level of smoothness and polish so that it doesn't become rough over the next couple of months, like we've all experienced with our bowls, where you finish it and it feels so nice and silky smooth, and you put it on the shelf, and then you go back a couple of weeks later and it's not very smooth anymore. So it takes a little bit of extra effort to get that nice smooth finish. And it's really worth it when you feel that bowl months later and it's still glassy smooth.
What finish?
This one's basically a wipe on varnish. It's General Finishes bowl finish, but it's basically just poly with some extra oil in it. Yep.
And next is John Drake.
Thank you. Long story short, a neighbor of mine, or a friend of mine, his neighbor cut down a beetle-killed ash tree and then decided to plank it out with a chainsaw freehand, which there wasn't a whole lot left, but he said if I wanted it, I could have it. So I took a lot of it and made a desk, and then the offcuts I put together, and I thought, I haven't done a platter. And so I decided I would do a couple platters. So this is the first one of many that I'll probably be doing because he wants some platters out of this wood. Found out it's really hard to get a long flat surface. It's a learning curve. So I was really happy. I wasn't really going to bring this, but I was really happy the way it turned out for my first platter. And then.
Are you going to leave it like this?
Yep. That's just walnut oil, doctor's walnut oil finish. And then the other piece that I had, which was a little smaller, just turned into a nice little plate. So again, I'll be doing more plates for him in the future.
Thanks. Joe Schaefer.
I'm Bruce. Joe is over there, but he asked me to be the spokesman tonight. Joe made this goblet out of walnut. It started out as a vase, but he had some problems and he decided to go to plan B. So he made a base out of walnut you can see it, the grain doesn't go in the same direction. And he used some epoxy that he had added a black dye for the transition between the base and the neck. And it's finished with what we call third, which is a mixture of polyurethane linseed oil and turpentine. It's a very easy wipe on finish. It's probably kind of like that general finish that we just heard about. So Joe did a good job.
Is this the one, he was working on this in open shop,
Exactly.
so a bunch of times.
Right. And things weren't working out. So
Yep.
he adjusted his.
Yep. Phil. Bill that. Not Bill, Phil.
Come on.
Here you go.
Piece of European beech wood, and I had some scrap off of another project, and I tried to break it, and it's almost impossible to break. And so I thought, that would be good for some fine spindle work. So that was the result of that. Done, hold it in the four-jaw chuck, and then just freehand holding onto it and working it down by hand. So no support on this end.
And I personally think beechwood is great. John Sutter.
Anybody ever tried to break it?
Oh, yeah.
Well, this was a project that started over a year ago. And I working on the feathers and getting the layout done. And then I decided to take some time off and get a knee replacement. So anyway, I got back to it a couple of months ago, and I learned a lot along the way. And the thing I learned the most about, and the hardest parts to do, was painting the eyes. So, but I enjoyed it, and here we are.
It is pretty amazing. Steve Newberry.
So I like these boat shapes with negative space underneath and a cup that hangs from them. And it's an unfinished piece, but I'm kind of working on chucking methods, which are fairly challenging for this project. My initial method was to glue a waste block on either side down the length, so it would end up being like a 12 by 12 by 4-inch thick blank, with the center third being the workpiece. And then you could mount this on a faceplate, bridging and not putting screws into the centerpiece, but putting them on either side. And the waste blocks were joined with a paper bag joint, where you glue paper bag between the two pieces of wood, and then you can knock them apart with a chisel later. So I turned the bottom shape, which is kind of a W shape. If it's right side up, it's a W shape, but it has a tenon on the bottom that fits my chuck, and finished the bottom side, and then flipped it 180 degrees and turned this top curved surface in the cup, and then turn it back to the original mounting, and put a chuck in an expansion into the recess of the cup and turn away the spigot. And then the challenge is to turn it 90 degrees and turn this top surface and turn the bottom surface. The way I used to do that was too complicated. I would take another waste block, which was 4 by 4 by 12, and turn a piece that fit the outside of the bottom like a puzzle. So it was the negative shape of the bottom portion of this, and then hot melt glue it into that, and then do the same for the top. Take another waste block and turn a puzzle piece that fit into the top and hot melt glue, so that you could then turn it on its side and put it on a faceplate, bridging from waste block to waste block with your faceplate, and turn one side. But then you have a curved surface, and you have to figure out how you're going to put that curved surface against the faceplate and hold it stable enough that you can turn that last face. The way I used to do that was that I would take a 1x4 piece of oak, like a plank, and I would glue it across from plate or from waste block to waste block with screws going into the waste blocks and into the faceplate. And then I would have access to that final surface. What I'm doing now to try and shorten it to where I can do a demo is I'm turning a plywood disc, putting that on the faceplate, laying this on its side, and then wedging it, hot melt gluing wedges into these curved surfaces here and into the bottom of the cup to try and stabilize it so I can put it on a faceplate and turn that last surface. So not quite there yet, but we'll get there. Then maybe we can do a demo.
Awesome. When you said you used to do it more complicated, I can't imagine more.
I guess teapots were just too easy to do.
Now, Bill, you.
Two simple bowls that I do smooth on the inside, rough on the outside. I texture these with a wire brush. I don't know what else to say about it. That's pretty much what I do. I was just talking to Kevin earlier, and the difference between what we do is that he polishes, sands the outside and leaves the inside rough, and I do the opposite. Well, I think that's really pretty much it. I don't know what else to say.
Awesome. I think we have one more person.
So this is a maple bowl that we got at the wood turning symposium down in Albany. This is the little small cord and sample of maple. This is a walnut bowl that I started in the bowl class back with when we had Stuart Batty here at Dave's place, and I finally finished it up. And it turned out pretty nice. And then I got two more from the blanks that we got from Albany at the Tone Woods. This is a piece of alder. And then, what do you think, John?
Good.
Good. And this is another piece from the Tone Wood people. This is a piece of maple.
That one's really smooth.
So
Good
Just-
deal. So now
I'll fill out.
we have to figure out, we have the craft supplies gift cards. And I'm gonna have to give one to the Peacock. Just because. I don't think anybody can argue that that is a work of art. And then I'm gonna go with this one. And the reason why I'm gonna go with this one, if you never go to open shop, Joe worked on this and worked on this and worked on this and never quit and came up with a really pretty goblet that is well made. So congrats, Joe. It's yours. Thank you. The rest of them are going to be a little bit harder. Does anybody have any that jump out at them? I like this one because it's a natural edge. It's a beautiful shape. So anybody opposed, in favor? All right. Dave, that if you haven't felt that, feel the shape of that. It just feels right. So the other one that I'm going to go with, not just because it's beechwood, but because this thin piece Having done thin pieces like this, you have that one cut between success and failure. So Phil, I'm gonna have to say this is really, really nice. So now we got one more. So anybody, any recommendations? This one? So I'm going to agree with that. If you haven't looked at the figuring in this bowl and the finish on this bowl, you should. This bowl feels right too. And if you run your hand down on the inside of this bowl, it is beautiful. So any opposed? Any in favor? All right. All right, Roger, back to you.
Hey, reveal. You're up, my friend.
How's that? How's that? Does that work? Hello. Okay.
Perfect. Good job.
All right. So wooden ladles. I've been thinking about and loving wooden spoons for a long time. As a matter of fact, a carved wooden spoon is probably one of the first things I ever made out of wood. When I was a little kid, I found myself unsupervised in a wood shop. Don't tell anybody, but I picked up a scrap piece of wood off of the floor and I went to the bench grinder and I turned the bench grinder on and I started shaping that thing. And I don't know what kind of wheels they had on that machine back in 1969 or whatever it was, but it actually shaped wood pretty well without burning it. And wish I still had that spoon, but where's the camera?
Put stuff on the tool rest.
Close up of the. So this is a.
Camera's right in front of your head.
Oh. This is a beautiful carved wooden spoon that I picked up at a wow, that's disorienting. At an estate sale a while back, and I imagine it's Scandinavian. It's got this beautiful chip carving on the handle, and really thin. Just the proportions on it are really nice, and the curves on it are really nice. And I love carved wooden spoons. I love wooden objects that are kind of straddle the line between, art or decorative and functional. I think this was probably picked up as a souvenir by someone and had never touched food until I got it. Since I got it, I actually use this in my kitchen quite a bit. And so this is of course a variation on the classic. Here we have a standard issue like soup spoon. And this is a shape that I imagine evolved into this basic form thousands of years ago. And it's perfectly suited for picking up food and putting it in your mouth. And it's kind of like the shark. It reached its perfect evolution and hasn't changed much for, they tell us sharks haven't really changed for millions of years. And so these are, examples of very functional and elegant spoon shapes. But how would you turn that? As a wood turner, the lathe is an extremely efficient carving machine, is one way you could look at it. And so once I got acquainted with the lathe and just how quickly and efficiently it could shape wood, it made me a lazy carver. Like, I don't want to spend all this time like carving out thing. I'm always trying to think, okay, how could you turn that? How could you do that on the lathe? And so, you know, we've probably all seen a turn scoop, which is basically you just turn like a goblet shape without the foot, and then cut away a portion to create a scoop. So that's one way you can do something like that. But you know, I'm always looking around. How could I make a spoon on the lathe? So then I see this. And this is something, you know, you'd probably see in like a commercial kitchen, or, you know, typical. Okay, so as a wood turner, I look at this and I say, what's going on here? It's a bowl. It's a small bowl. And a spindle. Okay, so I can turn that. There's nothing there that I can't turn on the lathe, right? But so how do I? So then it's just a thought process of, okay, so how do you, you know, and here I have some examples of ones I've done in wood. And so, you know, when I'm looking at this shape and I'm like, okay, so how can I turn that from a piece of wood? I ended up, okay, so there's a bowl. That's easy enough. I know how to turn a bowl. Here's a spindle, or if it were straight. I mean, this one I didn't bend. It kind of bent a little on its own in the opposite direction, actually, but it starts off as a straight spindle. So those are two shapes I can easily turn on the lathe. Okay, so one of the main keys to the execution of a piece like this then is how is the grain orientation, or how does the finished piece live inside of the tree or inside of the blank? And so it turns out it's very important the way the grain is oriented with the piece. So this is basically a small end grain bowl. And does everybody know what I mean when I say it's an end grain bowl? So, I mean, a lot of us, when we go to turn a bowl, we're going to turn a side grain bowl where it's got end grain here and end grain here, side grain here and side grain here. So why would I choose to do this as a small end grain bowl? Yeah, exactly. So I want the grain to be running this way so that the grain runs right up out of the bowl and into the handle. And so, you know, nobody turns a long thin spindle with the grain running this way. It would just be it would just be weak. Yeah. So I'll pass this one around. All right, so once I work that out, it's just a question of, you know, how do you start with a block of wood and figure out how to mount it on the lathe and where your centers are so that you can get to that point. So basically, so the blank for a piece like that is going to be, you know, just a block of wood like this. And so the handle is along the long edge of your block, and the bowl is here. So your centers for the handle, I like to give myself, I like to do like a flared out taper. So I like to give myself about a 3/4 of an inch at the top and about a 1/2 inch down here. So I'll come in 3/8 of an inch off of the edge to that center, which is going to give a 3/4. 3/8 and 3/8 is 3/4. I'll come in 1/4 inch off of the edge down here. And that, by the time we get here, is going to leave me somewhere near 1/2 of an inch. And then so what happens to all of this wood here? I don't want to waste that. So bandsaw magic. Ba-ding. So I cut that. So we take this, cut that out. And then, so now the trick is, how do we determine the centers for this bowl section? So what I do is I come in, I actually cut into the handle a little bit. So I'll take a point right here, and then I'll take a point off of this edge that's going to be my wall thickness. So the thickness of this little bowl is here. And so from this point, slightly into the handle, to this point, which is my wall thickness off of the edge, I measure that, and then I find the center of that here. Okay? Then from there, it's simply 90 degrees. So I'll mark out that center on this face. And then from the edge here, I'll just mark down 90 degrees from that center and go all the way to the bottom of the block. And so these are my centers for the bowl. Simple, right? Compared to Steve Newberry's thing, very simple. Exactly. So from this stage, then we go to this shape. So I'll go back to the bandsaw and cut out these two sides and end up with a piece like this. So let's see, the one I was going to turn for you. I have a couple here that I prepped. This one is a little too long, but here's the, still a nice piece of cherry here that came off of there. Totally usable for something. These two sides here are, how many pen blanks? So very little wood wasted. Next question is, what limits the length of this handle? And it turns out that is, how do you clear? Because see, from this point, it's Turner's choice which axis you want to go to first. But the way I think about it is, when I'm turning this long, slender spindle, which is the handle, and we'll go ahead and mount this for a second, just to show very clearly. So when I'm on the handle axis, this mass that is the small bowl, that is the other piece, is spinning around out of balance. So rather than working on the handle first, what I want to do is reduce some of this mass so that when I'm working on this long, thin spindle, I've lightened up, I've reduced the weight of this block here. So the way I think of it is I want my first step to be establishing the tenon on the bottom for the axis of the bowl, and then knocking off some of these corners and starting the hollowing, knocking off some of the corners and starting to create the bowl contour, which is all the time reducing the amount that it's out of balance, reducing the weight of this block. Then once I have that tenon that I can put in the chuck, I can actually go and start hollowing that out some. And then when I go back to the handle axis, I've reduced the weight of this quite a bit. And so Morse taper extender to the rescue. And as it turns out, this handle is a little too long for the reach that I have. I could just cut it off a little bit, but fortunately I have another one that was a little shorter, so I'm just going to go with this one. And so, any questions about how we get to this stage? I've always done it with dry. You could try it with green, but the fact that the wood is so much more flexible, I mean, it's easier to cut. It's a lot easier to cut when it's green, but the fact that the wood is so much more flexible has me thinking that it's going to be more difficult. You know, the dry wood fibers are much stiffer, and so turning this spindle with the bowl spinning out of balance, I think, I mean, I haven't tried it with green wood, but I think I'm probably going to be more successful with the stiffness that comes from it being dry.
Taking another piece of similar size block that your scoop is made out of, and hot gluing it to the other side to even out the balance.
Oh, okay. So it'd be something like
Yes.
something like that, or not that much, but you know, interesting thought. It might be worth a try, maybe especially if you're doing a larger, like maybe a larger or much larger version of this. It's not an extra. I haven't found it necessary to go to that extra trouble, but there may be a good place for that. And so, all right. So I've established the centers for the two axes. Yes. At first, I started the handle. Okay, so it didn't snap, but it did make the turning of the spindle more difficult as far as because with the other thing is with turning a long slender spindle, the lathe speed helps. Like sometimes if you can turn the speed up faster, it helps. And so having this out of balance means I'm having to go at a slower speed. But I haven't had one break for that reason. I have broken one, but not for that reason. But I did on my first one. I went back and forth a few times because I wasn't sure how big I was going to be able to create this opening until I turned the handle down a little more and to see how much room I was going to end up with there. But now I've kind of gotten the feel for that to where I can at least take off a lot of the weight from this before I do anything with the handle. So now that the centers are established for the two axes. My first step is going to be to mount it on the bowl, what I'll call the bowl axis. Thinking sometimes I want the piece I want the finished piece to be congruous and all one unit, as it's a continuous flowing lines, and it all works. I want it to all work together. But sometimes in the making process, it's helpful to think of it as two separate things. A small bowl and a spindle. And so right now I'm thinking about the bowl. So I'm mounting it on the bowl axis, and I'm going to have to crank this tailstock out almost as far as it can go so that this handle will clear. Back it off a little so that I have some room to tighten. Oh, that's the end. I'm going to go a little back. Tighten that.
Yeah, I want to see how he gets through the propeller to hollow it.
These guys are jumping ahead. All right. So that corner is catching there. See, I was lining it up with the handle, but that corner is catching there, so I have to back off a little. So if you can see how the tool rest is basically parallel with the handle here, from above would be good, but just a little. There we go. So, we have these best practices on the lathe, and one of which is don't use a longer tool rest than necessary if you're going to be working out on the end of the tool rest. So if there's going to be deflection or vibration, it's going to be further, the sturdiest part of the tool rest is right above this post, right? So unless there's any reason to, you're not going to want to be working out on the end of a long tool rest if it's a small piece. So you switch to a shorter tool rest to get better support right up where you're working. In this case, though, I like to have the longer tool rest sort of as a guardrail to remind me that this handle is spinning around here. Because once this thing is in motion, the handle just turns into a blur. And if I forget that it's there, so this having the longer tool rest reminds me, don't put my fingers past that point. And there are pros and cons to that as well, though, because if I had a shorter tool rest only over here, and I accidentally stuck my hand over here, this thing's going to smack me, but there's place for my hand to get smacked away, too. With this here, if I were to put my fingers there, I hate to think about what's going to happen in between the, But anyway, I still like having that there. Just it serves as a reminder that corner wants to get me. Okay, so I have to start a little further back because of those corners. I'll be able to move the tool rest in very soon once I knock those corners off. So with out of balance or out of round pieces, of course, you always spin by hand first before you turn the machine on. And it's always good to, without something that's out of balance or any piece really, it's always good to start at a low speed. That is not even actually a spur drive, it's just a cup. But I find that gives enough friction to drive it. Because I like, it needs to be small, especially when I come over here to the other center, which is only 1/4 of an inch off of the edge. I need something that's not, you know, a spur drive for the handle center would be hanging off the edge of the piece. Yeah, yeah, a narrow step center would be great. So now it gets exciting. And it's, let me make sure things are tight. Let me make sure things are tight. All right. So here's where we get to judge how much speed are we going to be able to get away with? Because it's easier to get a smooth cut with a higher speed. So it's a compromise. I mean, that's plenty. I'm going to go down a little bit actually and put on a face shield. That's at 814 now. I was a little over 1,000 before I turned it down. And I'll be able to turn it up a little bit once I do a little bit of work on that bowl. So does this interfere with that? No, it's okay. I am going to go a little faster. I'm looking at the numbers now. I don't have a readout on my lathe. I never know exactly how fast it's turning, but we're at 840. I'm just going to knock these corners off. It stopped on me because I don't have a spur drive. So with just that much, all it did was hit those corners. I'm able to move the tool rest in significantly closer now. Check my handle. All right. Let's go. So I'm just it's not round yet, so I'm hitting wood and then air, wood, air, wood, air, but I'm doing the cut just as if it was a solid cylinder. When it's spinning, you can see, there's like the ghost image of the solid cylinder that it would be if it were completely round. And so I'm just bringing the tool in exactly as I would if it were round. That was a little heavy. Could use a little more pressure on the tailstock. I like this gouge. I mean, it's relatively small work, actually. I mean, it looks like something big, but I'm actually, not very far off of the tool rest. It's spindle orientation, so it's a fairly easy, I don't have any end grain to deal with right now the way it's cutting, so I don't feel that I need a more massive tool. So yeah, this small spindle gouge works really, fine for me for just, because very soon I'm going to be doing some sort of fine detail work when I come in to create the spigot for the chuck. So it's Turner's choice, though. I mean, like you see some people choose different tools for the same task, and if you feel better with a different tool, that's certainly valid. But this is, I feel like it's a little bit deceiving because it looks like a bigger piece than it is. I mean, this is really sort of just small work actually right now. And so I need to know, oh yeah, I want to come. Reduce this quite a bit. I'm not getting the kind of friction that I usually get on this with my, maybe this tail stuff. Oh, you know, one thing I can do is by holding the piece stable, by holding the piece still and turning the spindle or the drive center, it kind of works it into the wood a little bit more. And that might give me some more grab. I think it'll do a little more speed now too. Maybe get used to, trying to get used to the speed control. It's very fine. Let's have a look. Okay, so one thing I need is to know what size this chuck wants for a tenon. Something like that'll be good. Don't want it too small. So what is that? Okay. So I'm going to start coming in. Skew. I'm very happy now I get to use a skew. All right, let's see. Did I cut away my, okay, no, that's good. And then one thing I want to be aware of is not to cut away my handle center. But that's kind of the last thing to go because it's so close to the edge. I still got a flat there actually. And I can come in a little smaller for the chuck. And so this piece right here with this where the tenon meets the piece, I'm creating a shoulder, and I want that shoulder to be nice and flat and true because that's what's going to register being a little sloppy with my tool work because I usually don't have as many people watching me when I'm doing this. And I have to admit, it makes a difference. So, mostly a peeling cut. Yeah. All right. So let's see if that's a little larger than what I've got here, but that looks good. All right. So I still have a little bit of a flat right there, but that's not gonna hurt anything. I can it'll still center just fine. I think putting that flat in the center of one of the jaws puts it in a place where the jaw doesn't actually even contact the wood usually anyway. So all right. Whoa. Okay, you don't want to come all the way off, do you? Luckily, it's a nice long. All right, that's not going to be important yet. Let's see. Knock this drive center out. So yeah, that's what I was using as a drive center. It's just I lost this one, but yeah. Where did I put that chuck key? There it is. Yeah, it might be a little. Got it a little too deep right there. All right. Tell you what I'm gonna do. Um, Got to go back a little bit. What I did is I made this just a little too long to fit all the way down into the chuck, so I'm gonna have to go back to the. Okay. Go back a step. I actually could do the handle center for that. No. How did I? Okay. That's weird. So I'm just going to trim a little bit off. Right here. Being careful not to turn away my handle center, which I almost did. Hopefully that's enough. Anybody hear about the wood turner who won the lottery? somebody asked him what he was going to do now. He said, I'm just going to keep doing craft fairs till the money runs out. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and shape the outside of the bowl a little bit more, and then I'll come around and start hollowing. I just want to double check the tightness on this because. All right. So when you're just holding one of these things in your hand and you try to flex the handle, you're not going to feel much at all. It's really pretty sturdy. But when it's mounted securely on a heavy machine, even before I've turned this slender, you can feel quite a bit of flex there. So that's something to be aware of, especially as you start turning the speed up. Because as you turn the speed up, the force will actually start to move that handle out away from the center. And I've actually had it to where I had the tool rest like this, but really close, and it was clearing just fine. But then as I turned the speed up a little bit more, I started to hear a tick, 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 tick. The handle started hitting just the force of the rotation, pulling that handle away from center, started moving it enough to where it, and then that was the one guy asked earlier about one snapping. That was the one that snapped on me, because at first I was like, what is that ticking? And then it was like tick, 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 snapped it off. And when they snap off, it's going to be, especially once you start rounding off the bottom of the bowl, the more you cut into this curve right here, the less and less continuous grain you have coming from the handle into the bowl. So if there's a weak spot, it's right there. Like the handle just came off and took a little piece of long grain down off of the side of the bowl. I'm at 1200 right now. I'm going to start my exterior shape like right there. I'm tapping that sound is the handle. I'm going to ride that line right down into the bowl. I'm also just going to hog off. It's going to hog off a bunch of material there. So this is just reducing the weight and bringing things into balance, but I don't want to go too thin there yet, because I want I don't want to continue cutting around the bottom of the bowl too far yet because I want a good amount of meat there for this hollowing. I'm just going to take off some of this rough stuff because I don't like it. Ah, smooth. All right. So, before you ask me why I was using such a small tool, for the hollowing, I like to use an oversized tool. So, when I'm hollowing into dry end grain and the tool is projected fairly far off of the tool rest, I like a small cutter and a big handle. So the larger this cutter is, the more trouble you can get into, the more force, the more downward force as the wood comes around and comes across that cutter. If you have a big wide cutter on there, there can be a tremendous amount of force as it goes into the wood, especially if you accidentally go a little too aggressive. So with a smaller cutter and a lot of leverage, that helps me in a situation where the tool is, quite far off of the tool rest. And so that, because when you're near the tool rest, most of that downward force, as the wood is spinning, it's coming around, it's coming down against the cutter. And so it's trying to push the tool down. When you're close to the tool rest, all or most of that force is going into the tool rest. As you start to come out and out and out further, of course, your fulcrum is further away from where the force is. And so I like an oversized tool for that. And so this is, it's basically just like, it would be like hollowing out the bottom of a big, like sort of V-shaped end grain vase or something. So I can angle the tool rest into the piece a little bit. Why does it seem like I usually do this the opposite way on my lathe at home? Okay, so this one, I don't know how much I'm going to get away with there. Something like that. 30 minutes left, okay. Something like that. I'll make sure everything is tight. I think that's a 3/4. 5/8 or 3/4. I think it's 3/4. Yeah. Yes, 3/4. Yeah, so you can kind of see a ghost image of what you could pretend is a solid form, kind of like an open vase shape. However, if it were a solid form, you could rub the tool on the side of the piece and it wouldn't be the end of the world. But in this case, you have to avoid all of that ghost part. You have to avoid it completely. Just don't even try to touch it. So it's the insertion and the withdrawal are very critical times. So as I'm coming in, I want to be sure that I am in the safe zone. And I wish I could remove this tailstock. There's a little plate here that, yeah, at least that'll help. But the tailstock won't. The tailstock doesn't want to come off completely because there's a little plate screwed on there. Oh, we're gonna be all right. So, wow, that looks interesting on the camera. So we're hollowing this. Just basically just deep end grain hollowing. And so when I'm at center, I'm holding the tool fairly level. I could also tilt it a little bit, but as I come off to the side, I'm going to angle the cutter towards the cut a little bit, and that's going to give it more of a like a negative rake. If I hold it straight level like that, it's going to be much more aggressive. Still works. In some cases, it's good. And as I come over towards the handle, and I'm almost coming off the end of the tool rest there. The tool rest I usually use doesn't have this wide of a profile, so I'm able to angle it in a little bit deeper and come a little bit further that way. Yes. So the question was, would it be easier to pre-drill a hole in the center? And I think, yeah, it probably would. However, yeah. The fact that this is an angle to the handle helps, because you could, but the question then is the quill on your drill, or how do you are you going to be able to get your drill in there to drill that, and how are you going to set it up so that that drill is at the proper angle? Can certainly be done. There are answers to all of those questions, and they're not that complicated, but I've always just done it this way. You know, one of the cool things about demos, one of the cool things I think about watching someone demonstrate how they make something that they make is not necessarily so you can do it exactly like they do, or the point isn't even necessarily for anyone to go and make something just like this, even though that's what I'm showing you how to do. And you're welcome to. But it's also just inspiration. I mean, part of the inspiration for me in how I got my brain thinking about how to do this was watching Soren Berger make one of his multi-center scoops, which one of my friends was supposed to bring tonight for me to help with part of what I was talking about, but he didn't make it. That's okay. But if you've ever seen one of Soren Berger's multi-centered turn scoops, when I was sitting watching him do that, I was thinking, wow, that is really cool. Maybe I'll try it someday. I never did, but it gave me, it got the wheels turning, you know, and I think on down the line, it helped me think through how to do this one. So anything I do or say about how I think about this or how I do it, if you want to try it somehow different or a variation on this design, something completely different, but if any part of this just gets you thinking or inspires you, then, you know, that's a success, I think. So this part is not, I mean, it's exciting, but it's maybe not the funnest part to watch after a while. Because I'm just hogging out just hogging out wood from the inside of this thing. And so I'll come over and I'll come right up to, so that's the handle that we're hearing right there. So that tells me how big, the inside of this opening can be. Coming right up till I hear that tick, 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 tick. That's the handle I'm cutting into right there. So I'm just going to come right from there into the piece. Let's see what that looks like. No, it's just a flat scraper. It's a piece of high-speed steel, a piece of square stock high-speed steel that's just got like a round nose, a small round nose scraper ground on the end of it. I imagine it would, yeah. And if I take too big a bite, that's how it sounds. Pretty ugly. And Roger told me about 20 minutes ago I had 30 minutes left, so I don't think it was 20 minutes ago, but I think we've got the idea of what the hollowing process is. So I'm going to go ahead and shift over to the handle, and let's see what that part looks like. So, let's see. No, at this point, I would normally hollow this out more, but not to the finished depth, because I want to then, after I've finished the, after I've turned and sanded the handle, I'll come back and do the final outside shape. I'll come back to the bowl spigot and do the final outside shape, because I'm not sure until I see the proportions of everything, exactly how thin I'm going to make the where the handle meets the bowl. Some pieces, some pieces that ends up a little thick. Some pieces I want that to end up a little thicker, and sometimes it just depends on the proportions of the piece, the proportions of the length of the handle to the size of the bowl, and what looks right. So until I've turned this handle taper all the way down to the bowl, I don't want to finish this outside shape, because I want that to kind of blend in. Finish hollowing it, yeah. There's no way to sand it well, there might be. I'm not going to say there's no way to, but the way the inside of the bowl gets sanded is with a car valve, an old car valve that I've glued a piece of rubber onto, and I put sandpaper on there, put that in a drill chuck, and just, and that the inside of the bowl gets finished sanded off of the while it's not turning. And I thought that was going to be terrible, sanding that end grain without the benefit of being able to sand on the lathe, but it actually usually polishes up really nice and fairly quickly. So I'm removing the chuck. Right. And going back to this one. So now this is where having a small drive center is helpful, because the center for the handle axis is so close to the edge of the piece. And that's why I also like it having it be not just a point, but also a cup, because having that cup dig into the wood where it's not hanging off the edge, which partially sometimes it's put that the circle that is formed by that cup is partially off of the edge, but the part of it that's still in the wood helps hold things quite a bit. Thank you. If I move that closer to the center, it's going to push the whole handle, right? It's going to push the whole handle more towards the center, and then it's going to reduce how big you can make the interior opening of the bowl. Yes. So by keeping that center close to the edge, I'm able to, normally I would take this extender out, because things are more stable without it. But I'm not sure I can. This live center is now jammed in there, and it doesn't have yeah. I'm going to turn that on and hold the piece still, and then crank the tailstock in a little bit. That's going to help kind of drill that or burn that cup center in. I'm going to turn the speedway down now, because we haven't turned it on this axis yet at all. So I'm going to turn the speed all the way down, so we don't know how much vibration this is going to cause. So start slow and work my way up. And before I get that set, I'm going to bring the tailstock in. I'm sorry, the tool rest. All right. So we start slow, and then slowly bring the speed up to where it seems a compromise between safety and smoothness of cut. So I'm going to start off with a small roughing gouge. We're at 1150 right now. Not bad. This lathe is pretty stable. Thanks. Good idea. Small roughing gouge. Basic stuff now, right? It's just, I should get Phil Lapp up here to do this for me, since he's such an amazing spindle turner. That trembler is quite impressive, actually. Yeah. I'm not the best spindle turner. Turning long, slender spindles, I find to be quite challenging. You end up with a lot, there are a lot of vibration issues that can come into play. And right now, while this spindle is not even close to round, I can't do all those fun things like I'm starting to be able to here. You can steady it with your fingers to dampen the whip and things like that. Right in here, furthest away from so right here where it's on the right where the live center is in the wood, it's very easy cutting. It's so stable. Then the farther you get away from any kind of support, the more things can deflect and move, and you start to get all kinds of interesting things happening. So as I come in here towards the end, I'm going to angle the tool back this way so that I don't run into that, so that the wings of my tool don't run into that bowl that's spinning around there. Could also turn it on its side and bring that little wing in. And I'm also round enough now that I get to be very happy again because I get to use the skew chisel. The dreaded skew. If a lot of people are afraid of the skew chisel, but if you're going to do much spindle turning at all, I think it's well worth making friends with, because there are a lot of things you can do with a skew that leave a much nicer finish and will get you where you're trying to go a lot faster and easier than almost any other tool, in my opinion. So yeah, now I'm gonna lower that. So Sammy the safety buffalo, of course, says, never adjust the tool rest while the lathe is spinning. Most of us do that all the time, though. Professional wood turners would laugh at that. Of course, they're always, the piece is still spinning and you're adjusting the tool rest. However, with a piece like this, I would recommend following that safety rule because maybe for obvious reasons, but like if this was just a straight spindle, I would have probably left the lathe running to readjust things. But the fact that I'm going to lower the tool rest, and I kind of like the best position to do that is like off to the side and stuff, and there's stuff spinning around out of screw, so it's usually best with an off-center piece or multi-center piece to go ahead and follow that safety rule of stopping the lathe before you adjust things. And I'm quickly running out of time. I'm obviously not going to finish this piece tonight. There are a few things I did want to show. So anyway, this is pretty straightforward from here on out as far as the handle goes. I refine I want to just make a nice, you can make the handle any shape you like. Most of mine I've done like a taper where you've got a kind of a flare out, kind of flares out at the end, kind of creates a nice feel for a place for your hand to stop, and then it tapers in towards the bowl. That's what I want to get to before we quit. Yeah. So I'm gonna put this part. I'm gonna put this part on hold. That's all pretty. Are there any questions about anything so far to this point? To do what? Oh, no, I haven't, but one certainly could. So that one that we passed around, did that make it back up? Oh, I see it. So this nice curve, yeah, that started out as a straight spindle. But through the magic of heat and steam, well, here's my steaming rig. Old thrift store tea kettle, turned wooden adapter with a little piece of metal pipe. Old piece of washing machine drain hose. Old piece of foam pipe insulation. This thing balances when it's full of water. And so I get a good boil going in here. Steam is piping out of there. Put that on there to limit the size of the hole. We've got a big hole there, so I want to, and it's nice, this foam is nice and padded or whatever, so delicate pieces or whatever. And then we just take our straight handle, shove it in there, and this thing balances when it's full of water. And so let that steam away for about 20, 30 minutes. Then I pull it out. I go 20 or 30 minutes. I mean, a general rule of thumb for steaming that I've heard is an hour per inch. But with something this slender, I figure a half hour max is probably plenty. And then no, I never have soaked it. I just put it right into the steam. And then bending form. So I'll pull it out of the steamer, stick it in here, take a clamp, clamp it to the form. Then I have a little wedge here if I want to push. If I want to push that against the form more, I can take this little wedge and put it between the handle and the. So this one was obviously, it's either sprung back a little bit or I used a different form on this one. I don't want to force it. I don't want to force it all the way, but if it was flexible and I wanted to force it down all the way onto the form, I could just take this little wedge and stick it in there. And then I'll just take that and let it dry for a day. And there it is. So, I feel like there was something else I wanted to talk about too. Oh, the shaping, the final shaping of the outside. So because the handle is thicker than the final wall thickness that I want, I end up, it usually looks about like this when it comes off the lathe. And so I'm going to make a line here. See, I don't know if you can see where there's still a little bit of a flat here from where the outside of the original block was. But that's about the final wall thickness that I want, or it's close to it. So that pencil line, so I actually want a wall thickness that is thinner for most of the bowl, but then starts to thicken out a little bit. I don't know if you notice on a finished one, it's actually a little thicker around the handle. And I've flattened this handle out a little bit to make it as thin as possible. But if you can see it from the end, you can tell that it gets thicker gets thicker right around the handle, and then it tapers down to a thinner wall thickness for most of the bowl.
You do that by thinning it from the inside.
No, I do that on the outside. So, and I just wanted to show just how fast you can actually do that with just a sanding disc. And I don't want to make a lot of dust, but I'm going to make a little. Rolling. So just with a simple sanding disc like this in the lathe, you can very quickly do quite a bit of shaping on the outside here. I don't know, let's see. Can the camera, yeah. Can we see that? I want to be able to see that pencil line just on the other side of the, yeah. So you can see this pencil line I've made for my desired wall thickness and how much wood there is between that and what I want. So, but this is just 150 grit. I rarely start with anything more coarse than 150. Thanks. Make sure the spindle is unlocked. I'm going to turn the speed down again to start. Anytime I've got a new setup, I always want to start slow. So if you can see where that pencil line is, I don't know if you can zoom in even more. It's saying 1400 for the RPM. That's surprising. That's faster than I thought. That's good. Thanks. So you can see how quickly I can get to that line. And I start off just kind of square, just even though and then to blend, and then I just blend that in. That's also quite quick. So with just that I did, just that quick, I'm already at my desired wall thickness and got it. How do I want to hold that so it shows that curve in profile? So you can, it looks like a fairly fair curve from where I started sanding into the body of the bowl. And so you can just go around, bring it down to that wall thickness, come around, blend it right. Start thickening it just a little bit down to the back of the handle. You can flatten off the back of the handle a little bit, like this one is. On the inside, oh, yeah, I've left this meat here around the handle because this is an angle to the block. The rim of the bowl is at an angle to the block. But when I'm making this cut on the bandsaw, I would be at 90 degrees to this edge. So if I cut it here, it's going to that's exaggerated, but it's not going to follow this. It's not going to follow this line. It would actually be down. So I've left that meat around the handle just to offer options. I mean, are we about done? Okay. Yeah, this first one here, I actually tapered the wood up into the handle on the sides even, but I've started preferring to bring it. So in any case, the answer to your question is on the sanding disc also. So you can just bring it in flat like this and refine this top edge very quickly on the sanding disc. So the finished piece is probably 95% turned and 5% carved, something like that. So by bringing in the steam bending and just a little bit of carving, you're able to create something that doesn't necessarily catch the eye as, oh, that's a turned piece. And it brings in sort of a flow, more of a kind of a flowing organic feel to it. And so that's that.
Great job. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. It's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
You know, one other thought, when I was messing with, thought about how you would position this in the tree. And if you had a limb that's coming off like at an angle here,
Uh-huh. Yes.
pith is coming down like that, you've got this pith coming in like this,
Yeah.
okay? So if you position this such that cup is like this and the handle is like this. you
It'd have
that-
a side grain, almost a side grain bowl. No.
And you have interlocking grain.
Uh-huh.
Two grain patterns are meeting
Uh-huh.
right at the base of the handle.
Yeah.
going into the bowl, so it'll